suit tie.
And
Everyone's in sweatpants and just like they weren't there for the same program. They were there for the visual arts making. And then our boss like Elon throws up. He's like, "What are my
Can I help you?
No, I'm just trying to get everyone.
Calm down.
Calm down, yeah.
Okay.
All right, there we go.
So everybody seemed to have come. I can't even believe it. So this is sort of like the mailman show. We made it through snow, sleet, ice, wind. Then we had summer there for a few, 3 or 4 days. We went against the Steelers. Remember them? Yeah, they lost. But we prevailed. And I can tell that full moon is still having its influence.
Yes.
Right? Thank you. I busted out the spring because we got through the winter.
Yes.
I forget what day you're supposed to wait till Memorial. Today, it's sunny out. So
I think are you supposed to wait for a hedgehog or something?
this is number 8, and earlier today, I posted something because I'm an Instagram maniac, so I posted. Actually, I just went to Live Worship Shop and all the templates for the various shows. So as I was doing that, I started, how am I going to wrap this? So I just said words. You know, words that were coming to me when I was thinking about what had happened here. So here are the words: discovery, warmth, opportunity, diversity, introduction, congeniality, depth, legacy, illumination, personality, appreciation, expertise, history, collaboration, epic, scholarship, gratitude, improvisation, solace, accomplishment, connoisseurship, advocacy, exhilaration, and frivolity. That's from a guy who could never spell. But, I got some big words.
Where did soulless come into it? Did you say
Pardon me?
soulless? Did you say the word soulless?
Soulless. Doesn't that mean like,
Solace.
Solace.
okay, I said soulless, but it's solace.
Even I know what that
It's
means.
almost the same thing.
All right. There's a guy named Paul Cusick who's a director here. There he is, Paul. And I knew the John A. Herman Memorial Museum because I used to deliver like 40-some years ago. I was a delivery guy. And I would come by Bellvue and various places and I'd see that sign. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna stop in there sometime. So somewhere along the line I did. I came in and I was pretty knocked out because I like self-taught by John A. Herman's watercolors. And then every once in a while I'd come back, maybe wait 12 years, wait another 6 or 7, and then come back. So about a year or so ago, I came in, Paul was here, and I saw that they were doing shows rather than just showing John A. Herman's work. So I said, well, you know, I collect and I curate some shows. He said, well, let me know if you ever want to do something. So this summer sometime, we talked, and I said, well, what do you have lined up? He said, well, July, September I have some, October. He said, but nobody wants to do anything in the winter. I said, well, I will. So I was thinking, well, what artist or group kind of show? Okay. And I thought, well, why don't I do something? Do mine. Do what I do. And so first I was thinking I'd have 2 shows, one for January, one for February, a self-taught and a fine art. And then I thought, well, there's only so many walls. You know, and my son Reese, who was here last night, he drove in from Brooklyn. He said, well, why don't you do some themes, do something thematic? Is that the word?
Yeah.
Okay. And I thought, yeah, I could, you know, so I started categorizing. And then later he tells me, he said, yeah, Pat, but I didn't mean do 8 shows in 8 weeks. Because the whole concept is just so beyond to do 8 museum shows, because it is a museum, in 8 weeks. And I know it's Guinness World Record stuff. I mean, I know that because, but I thought, well, I have, you know, what do I need? I know where everything is, or mostly in my house. And what I can't find, I'll find eventually. So the first one was really the culmination of a dream, because in 1996, I got from a local auction from the estate of Louise Pershing, whose work is there. She did the legs over there. Well, she's done a lot of work.
Yeah.
So from her estate, I worked on, and down in the basement of her estate, I've worked with her son. Well, that's fun. I had a friend, Mary Shaw, who was the Grand Dame of Pittsburgh Art. She was in her 80s, I was in whatever I was in. And she said, oh, Persh's son's in town, all her stuff's there. I never met Louise Pershing. We gotta get over there. So we get over, she introduced to the son. He gives me the keys to the place. Well, because, first of all, I said, well, I think I could help you do a sale with absolutely no experience doing any kind of an estate sale. So he gave me the keys, and I was down in the basement, and behind a stack of frames, down there on the floor was a maybe Picasso, about this big.
Wow.
There's a photograph of it in the kitchen.
Wow.
But this first show, because I've been on this case since then, that little painting has got me all around the New York art world, and many of them think it is, but only somebody with the blood of Picasso can say, yes, my father did this. Or they can say, no, he didn't. And if he did do it and they say, no, he didn't do it. And vice versa, if he didn't do it and they say yes, then he did do it. So, but it's really taken me, that little piece is really taken me unbelievable places for me, the Ford City guy from up the river. And so the first show I was able to put it right there, the actual piece, to hang my maybe Picasso in a museum. So thank you, Paul. And,
So have they seen
pardon me?
it? Have they seen it with him?
No, not yet. Now it's Paloma Picasso. Anybody remember Paloma Picasso from? Did you go to Studio 54? Did you see her there?
Oh,
No. but she's a Studio 54, and she's a Warhol buddy. He painted her. She did some hanging around. So Claude, her older brother, passed away, and he was in charge of the administration, and now she is. And somehow, I feel like it will be that it's a different page with everything. I could be wrong. It could be really different. I don't know. But it's not an easy thing, and I want to take my time because it's fun. And let's see. I started as a music guy, collecting records, and so it's really to be able to put all those signed records up there. I've always been a little, if not a lot, starstruck. So to meet all those people, I always like to have met and spend, even if it's a minute or two, with somebody who's had an impact on all of us, you know, because they don't get there without talent or pizzazz or meanness or whatever. They all gotta have something. So to be there with Johnny Cash and Harry Belafonte and, you know,
Sophia.
who?
Sophia.
Sophia Loren, yes. So
Charlie moving.
Charlie, right? We were there. So Sophia
Did you hang out with
Loren.
Michael Stipe? Wasn't there
Stipe,
an REM
right.
thing? Yeah, okay.
Well, he'll be here in a minute. Not physically.
Seriously?
Not physically.
Damn.
But Sophia Loren, case in point, she was there. She had a fragrance, a perfume, and I forget which department store it was here in Pittsburgh. So I always like to be prepared. So I had more than a couple albums.
Gimbals.
And so you're only supposed to go in through once. Why the perfume go? Say hi and go. So the third time I went through, I'm like, there's this guy. But it's really something. So the music, albums is really where I first discovered art. Like art names maybe, like I think Pearls Before Swine had their album covered with that Harmonious Bosch maybe. And so in the 60s I started to get some of this. Of course Warhol with his album covers, David Stone Martin. So the illustrations and the art on album covers gave me my early education because I had no art history, no self-taught like many of the artists that I appreciate and have spent time with. So, and it was through music, and I was a concert promoter in the 80s, and I brought REM to Pittsburgh and to the Syrian Mosque in 1985 when it was half sold out and it was 1,000,000 degrees hot. Kids were dancing on the second balcony, and the fire marshal was going to shut the show down. And I said, "Hey man, I'm from Greenfield." And he thought I was like Los Angeles or something. And so the show went on, and then in 1986, a sold out show with REM at the Syrian Mosque. And the following year, they go to the big promoters and the big venues. And I went down to Atlanta to see one of their shows at the fabulous Fox Theater. And afterwards, I was with Michael Stipe, and I asked him where I could find Howard Finster because I had seen him on the Johnny Carson show. And if you have not had that experience, you might want to Google him on Howard Finster on the Johnny Carson show because he slayed it. I mean, Johnny was like, whoa, because he's playing banjo, and it's terrific. So I asked him where I could find Howard, because then, in those days of old, you had to ask somebody.
Yeah.
So I got to Rome, Georgia, and I gave him a call, and he said, well, it's getting dark now. Pretty soon it's going to be dark. There's a motel down the road you could stay in. I said, well, Howard, I only have some. So I got there. There was some daylight left, and for an hour and a half with Howard Finster, Jen knows, she's met him. You listen rather than have a conversation. So once in a while you ask a question. So he was saying things like, he had things on the ceiling. People. Yeah, my fans have put stuff up there in the ceiling, and he said, now, you could take that there image and you could put it on a t-shirt, and you could do, that could be for your own economy. I thought, does he say this to everybody? And then, in the kitchen, I have the first piece I got, it's a cheetah. And I said, Howard, how come you do so many, you do the cheetah? He goes, well, it's the fastest animal on earth, and then he tied it into Jesus somehow. and I remember once I was at a folk
What
fest
about
in
Noah's
Atlanta,
Ark?
Georgia,
Did you ever talk about Noah's Ark?
and there were, Howard was here, and there were 5 or 6, 7 people over there, and he said, ma'am, he said, are you wearing polka dots? And the woman said, yes, Howard, I have polka dots. He said, well, okay, and then he said, I just want to talk about fame. He said, I want to talk about fame. He said, I was just making my work, and then I had a big show up on Rodeo Road out there in California, and I got to thinking, I'm famous. I mean, all of a sudden, I'm famous now. And then he said, and then it come to me, no, Jesus is famous. I'm just little old Howard. that guy changed my life.
Wow.
I mean, he didn't get me into the church, but he changed my life because he was just so real. He was super real, and he didn't care about spelling. He just wrote, and he was on a mission, and he's not gone. He's not deceased because he is on his vision craft because he took off from Earth. He and his wife, and his neighbor and his wife, and this is the vision he had that he wrote about. And they took off for worlds beyond the light of the sun, sort of like that painting over there. So he's just gone, and he ain't coming back. But he took a TV camera with him to show the Earth people. And I printed up shirts in the 80s that said, "I was called from another world to work with people." And it was a big hit with Howard, and we sold them in museum shops and social workers, or just people who have some sort of the people who assist people and try to make things better, and it was a big hit, and Howard was all about that. He said, I got fans everywhere. I even love my infidel fans. so maybe you get a little flavor of like. So I started collecting his work. I started making prints with him, and then lo and behold, there are Howard Finsters sorta all around Pittsburgh area, and somehow I found them, they found me, and at one point there were like 9 people. Hey Ron, could you prop that door open, please? Yeah, with the thing, so it stays on, we'll get some air in here. I want James to fall out on us. Or me. So there were a group of about 9. Robert Wright specifically, we spent about 15 years working together, and and the last one just passed. Not unlike, I don't know if she's with Howard or where, but that was Kathleen Ferry, and she was the last of these 9 self-taughts, Jory Albright, and they all imparted so much with me. And I have letters they wrote me, articles that were written about them. So I got to come up with a plan, because a lot of the reason to do this was to not let them be forgotten, because they worked, they walked, they laughed, they filled me up with things, and I feel some sort of responsibility to have them known or remembered or something. So I guess the book will be about this thick. I don't know who will ghostwrite it, but someday. Well, does anybody have some impressions of what has been? Because some people have been here for all of them, a couple of them. Is there anything that stands out?
Like all of it?
Okay. We'll talk about it later.
The presentation,
Well,
how you put things together, especially the mantles. I'm really into, I've been to LA shows and I took pictures of every mantle.
well, this, thanks, this physical house, because it was a house. Brother Dan and Sister Ann lived here for a little while, or owned this house for a little while. So so it's a house, but it's also, a John A. Herman Memorial Art Museum. So in my house, I have mantles, and I have fireplaces, and I brought my own plants. And so I thought, well, I'll just do it up homey. And I would think about for the curation, I'm sort of drift off to sleep thinking, okay, that mantle, okay, Glenn Davis, John Cleveland here. So I started with the mantles, and then I go for the larger walls, and I guess there's nobody that knows my collection better than me. So, so it was all up there, and so I spun it around, and then, but what I would do, Meg, Pablo, Paul, Carl Franklin, one time my son Reese, get it all in one or two vehicles. The big ones would go in Meg's truck, and we pull over there and start loading in. Just things would be all around, and then I'd start to use my my good eye, and I'd start to place things. And it sort of amazes me. A lot of them, you know, I just like boom, and I didn't change it. Occasionally I'd change something. So I guess I got a knack for it. And
Pat, when it's at home, is it all hung, or or do you have storage areas, or like how much?
yes,
how much do
over
you
the
look
years
at?
I've been.
All of it is my
The
question.
more I collected, I put another, like G. David Thompson, I would just build another gallery. No. This show is what I have hung here are things that my walls are bare this time. So, this is, with the exception of, I think there's only one piece, that one, that's not up all the time. And in this room, okay, next point. The grandsons, the grandsons that no matter where you go, those boys are following you with their eyes. So I can't live with that. No, I don't need 4 more eyes watching. No, that one's not up. But everything else in this room, these 2 rooms, is up in my home, and
You have a room in your house that you have a bunch of just storage that people can look through.
Yeah, I
There's
do.
A
There-
lot of stuff that's not on.
right. And I do have some flat files, but this is another fantasy I used to have is, say there was a Blockbuster that went out of business, or some appliance store, and there was a big box in some strip mall or whatever. I remember once pulling out the one of those and just looking in and saying, yeah, man, just like that, and just go the whole length. And then I get some partitions here, and, you know, to have an exhibition of everything. But that wouldn't have touched the charm of this place, and how the closest to the collection, and so like my dad used to say, it's more better this way. He would joke around like that, but it is more better than a sterile
Yes.
academic something or other.
Like the original bars in the city.
Yeah. Pardon me? If I was to have a painting,
No, where do you have the 2 Warhol brothers?
what make,
Where do you have the 2 Warhol brothers? It's in, you have it in this show,
the
is that
what?
upstairs?
Oh, oh, the
And then there's another one
Paul
somewhere upstairs.
Warhol and his brother Andy?
Yeah.
There's this one, and then there's another one up in the stairwell. In 1990, I got a call from Andrew Van Sickle, who I met through Howard Finster, and when I first did the Howard Finster show in 1980s, late 80s, I knew some people, but I didn't like know people. But collectors, Howard Finster collectors were so giving that from Georgia they sent things up, and from New York City they sent things up. And Andrew Van Sickle was a young guy who lived one summer in 1987 with Howard Finster, and he helped around the garden. And he had a couple painted TVs, and he came in from, I think he was in Toledo at that time. And he was in his 20s, and he was a go-getter. And so about a year later, he called me. He said, "Hey, Pat," he said, I'm down in Swamp with Paul Warhola." He said, "Why don't you come on down?" So I went down, met Paul Warhola, and he had been doing this series of paintings. I was familiar because he was in Life magazine and To Tell the Truth with the real Paul Warhol, please stand up. So I was familiar, and I've always been a Andy Warhol guy. And here, we went down there and I lined up at the Hartwell Gallery in Shadyside. Did a Paul Warhol show. And his first painting was, well, actually Paul Warhol was a scrapyard guy. And he had a buddy in the scrap business. His name was Howard Gross. And Howard was one of those kind of guys that would bug you a lot. He'd say, hey, Paul, I want to get an Andy Warhol. Hey, Paul, I need to get an Andy Warhol. I guess he was thinking about Paul could help him out. He said, so Paul said, Howard, you can't afford to get a Warhol. He said, the closest you'll get is if his brother does a painting. He said, okay, do me a painting. So that's how Paul started his career. Although he helped, when they were kids, he helped Andy transfer things out of the comics, and their mother was a folk artist. But so he painted a Heinz vegetarian bean can painting and sold it to Howard. But then he started to paint. He got into it. So I lined up Heinz vegetarian. The Heinz company sponsored it, and we brought all these vegetarian bean cans. In one of the shows, I had a photograph from the show. So people started taking the cans, and Paul was in white overalls and doing his smock thing that he could do to perfection. And so he signed all the cans, and I had a couple here. But I had a little one, I had a baby bear, a mama bear, and a papa bear vegetarian bean can, but the mama bear exploded after one. I mean, it didn't like beans on the wall or anything, but it bulged and went. So I had the other two here. And Marty came, and Jamie, his other brother, came to one of the exhibitions. So, is that story done? Is that dangling somewhere? Come on, Jay. Okay, next.
Who is this artist?
Pardon?
Who's that artist?
Okay, Bonnie wants to know about this artist. I'll tell you, you're helping me out because these are things I would like to talk about that I would have forgotten. Because I'm I'm an Instagram fellow, I gravitate to art and artists. And I saw this artist whose name is Helen Bryant, and she is in Hastings, England, down on the coast, on the English Channel. And I was her first collector. And Helen was a punk rock kid. She had the mohawk. She liked all the music I liked. I was too old to. She's younger, but she's a grandmother, and her work knocks me out. So I think in 2019, Megan and I took a trip to England, not to see castles and cathedrals, but to hang with artists. So there are about 4 or 5 artists from England. There's John McEisen, I think he's upstairs, and Ben Edge, who did the John Cain. I commissioned that because he was a John Cain fan. He's from London, and he since has come to Pittsburgh, and we've shown him. So this, they say, oh yeah, you have Instagram friends. Yeah, I understand. I have some imaginary friends myself. But things like this can happen. I mean, when I did the International Artists of Instagram, we telephoned her. Helen was right here in the room with us, and it was fantastic. So that was one of the shows.
It's pretty good.
say that.
Well,
I hated being that.
okay, so that new, Bat Well, and he was a nail artist in the sixties. And, so I have one here, in the show, a couple shows ago, I had, two and a lot of information. I got a call once from a woman from Florida whose husband was involved, and he had archives, and he had since passed, and she had a couple bats in the closet, and all the information, and they were, everything was just perfect. I bought them, had them shipped up, and thank goodness, because I don't think there's too much information on the Creative Arts International.
Dad, tell us about that.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Matt, like most people, at the time, was started out trying to be a painter, and he's painting black and white, and he made a small painting, and he put one tack on it. Then he started, deciding how he would make figurative faces and stuff. And I never seen anyone work like him. He had 2 or 3 people that imitated, but no one came close to that. And he was a marvel to see him work because he put the tacks in his mouth. He spit them out, they always had a hammer with them, and he could really work fast. And also, he was a very literate guy. He could really read poetry like no one I know, maybe except Dylan Thomas. But that could really read. And played some piano. And he was just like a guy from the hill, a street guy pretty much, except when it came to art. And of course, his own worst enemy, which he admitted himself, his drug habits and stuff like that. But, he was a great human being, and I think one of the best sculptors I knew. And he was a very good friend, and of course we had the same taste in music and poetry and so forth. So, and also I was a good cook, and that had very little food because he never gained any weight. But I admired him for his mind and his talent.
Thanks for doing that. Himself is a pretty good sculptor. So there, on the mantle are a few, the tall piece, and probably you show the little, those 2 wooden pieces there. Okay, and then the other one. So that's a small bat. In New York, there are some big bats. We went to, Meg and I were fortunate enough to go up to the Karma Gallery opening last year, and wow, it was, to say it was a treat.
Westmoreland.
What's that?
The Westmoreland.
Yeah, the Westmoreland. And for a while, for a number of months, three of your pieces were in front of Rockefeller Center, 3 bronzes that they had cast. And man, right there on Fifth Avenue, New York City.
Wow.
Wow. Yes, John.
And who makes these metal pieces that you have, those geometrical metal sculptures?
This, that tall one, that's Glenn Davis.
Okay,
And the mobile is by Glenn Davis.
okay.
He was a photographer. This marble is not by him, that's by Louis Scott, but I had another marble in another show of his. Glenn Davis was a modernist who lived on the West End, in a
Is
little
this his mobile
farmhouse.
too, out in Long Hall?
Yes, that one.
Okay.
And he was a bachelor. Did you know Glenn much?
I know him very well. Way back when they weren't in the galleries, always were involved at the Pittsburgh Center for the Arts. They had 14 groups just about it. I was in Group A, Society of Sculptors, and the Associated Artists. And Glenn was in both of those groups, and very active in the Society of Sculptors. In fact, I left a will to the Society of Sculptors. So he was very active in that. I know him very well, yeah.
Well, he along with Louise Pershing and a few others,
well,
Louise
too.
Pershing did this painting.
I knew everyone pretty well that was old.
This painting above this fireplace was in the inaugural show at what at that time was the Arts and Crafts Center in 1945.
Wow.
And that's by Glenn Davis.
Wow.
And I have a newspaper clipping of that painting with a boy and a girl about your size, Baxter. And they're in front of that painting and doing sort of like a quizzical look. And the caption is, oh, so that, it's almost in so many words. Oh, so that's art? This is 1945, and it's a, the press, art criticism, you know, it was a resistance to modernism. And it was as prevalent in Pittsburgh as it was in New York or Paris or any other place at that time. And Glenn I have letters, because Glenn was a bachelor, and I went to see him because he knew Louise Pershing, and I thought he might know something about that Picasso. And they used to paint in the barn, so he was never in the house in Green Tree. But he had this, in this little farmhouse, it was not unlike this. His work, things that he collected, he had Alpers, he had, who all did he have? Anyway, he had a nice little collection. And he was in his 80s or so. And so I wanted to give him a show of his, you know, I wanted to do a solo show for Glenn Davis, but he wasn't interested. And then somebody told me, a neighbor said that Glenn had told him that solo exhibitions are for working artists. He worked for Michael Benedum. He was an accountant for Michael Benedum. I mean, he was all about art, but he had a job where he had an income, and he thought anyone a working artist should only have he was in many group shows. Actually, Pablo, he was in the Art Institute of Chicago in 1947, had the first abstract and surrealism show, and Glenn Davis was in it, along with Russell Twiggs and about 3 or 4 Pittsburghers. But in that show in 1947, I'll show you the catalog, or anybody who became huge in the 50s was in that show. Wow. Stuart Davis, Paul, Rothko, I mean, just the whole canon was in there. And our Glenn Davis was in the same show.
I think next to the Armory Show in 1913, that's probably the most important exhibition of paintings in America.
I've never heard it ranked, but I'm there with you on that, Marty. It was abstract and surrealism in America. So it was a big survey show. I mean, it was a real big
The
survey
curator
show.
went all over the country and chose the work.
Yeah, it was a Catherine Drew, no, not Catherine Dreyer, Catherine Koo.
Catherine Koo and I think Rich.
There were a couple of them, and they came to the Arts and Crafts Center, and that's probably where they met Glenn. I don't know how in those days you would know who to go see, but they liked his work. And anyway, these are, he was a master of the line, Glenn Davis. So these are all free. You know, he just sat down there and made these.
Wow.
No protractor, no.
Wow.
He just made them.
Wow.
And I brought these, and I want everyone, if you would, please take a Glenn home with you. I'll have them over, and I even have a little bag of gum bands. For gum bands.
You know I love gum bands.
Who's this? This is upstairs.
Okay, this, to show me this painting that is upstairs above the ivories and the,
Oh,
and
yeah,
the
that's a
sculptures
great
of
one.
John A.
That's a
Herman.
great
And this is John Mackay, who's a favorite Instagram artist, who I have not met, but
Lovely.
back and forth for a long time.
Where's John Mackay from?
He's from the north of England somewhere.
K-I-G-H?
M-C-K-I-E,
K-I-E, okay.
Mackay.
Yeah.
Pat, so did
Yes?
John Mackay ever say anything about this group of humans and an encased?
No, I never really
It looks like
talked
all
too
the
much about
images
it.
of slaves on a boat.
But he had one painting I had here and it said, punch him in the face or something. So he's a comedian. But I really like his art.
Are there a lot of portraits of you hanging upstairs in the bathroom?
What's that?
Are there a lot of portraits of you hanging upstairs in the
Okay,
bathroom?
Donna, the prima
Rostek.
donna, who has not missed any of the exhibitions.
Except for the first one, sorry.
She asked about the portraits in the necessary room upstairs on the green tile. And I have a good buddy, we went to different schools together, his name is Phil Rostek. He's, I think he's a genius, he's only done about 1,000
From Africa.
compositions as a composer
That
that he has on
1,500,
YouTube, and let alone the fine arts.
It's up to 1,500.
Yeah,
Wow.
so Phil surprised me one day with a portrait of me that I did not sit for. And it's a portrait of me as Oscar Wilde. And then there's another portrait of me on the other side of the mirror. The other day, Paul and I, I was just about wrung out. I needed a shave. But anyway, I'm washing up, I looked up, I saw me in the mirror, and those two paintings, I thought, oh my God, I'm turning into them.
A little unsettling when you're on the throne in there.
Is that a good place to end?
Yeah, no fun
I mean, hey, we can go to 7 or 8 o'clock. But
Because people have asked me, how can people contact you to purchase the art
Right.
that was in the other collection
Right.
that you found?
oh, I have an agent out of New York. So on Madison Avenue, and you just, anybody wants to, you just call me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me
There's
an
that
hour
one.
later.
Okay, Elizabeth was wondering about some.
Oh,
Wonder
Elizabeth was.
Howards And, some other things that you think through.
It's in English.
So someone saw something, and now they're mulling it over. They couldn't make it, she couldn't make a snap decision. Well, that's good.
And she
Because,
wants to know
we
if
don't want
it's
anyone to have
available.
buyer's remorse. Well, not only do I, but my son, Reese, he was about, was I holding him? No, I don't know. He was probably little. We were down at the National Gallery and there was a Picasso exhibition. And so I'm holding him and I said, well, what do you think, Reese? So we went down the line and he said, yes, no, yes, no. This woman was like, holy hell. I said, he's like that. So, yeah, I had it pretty fast. But sometimes I'll go back, occasionally, but not too often.
Did you buy all this?
At the National, well, you mean on the Yes got that one, no, they weren't selling. This is James Simon, who's a sculptor extraordinaire. He's over on, and if you have an opportunity to go and see a performance, he has a nice big space and occasionally has performances out in the bamboo garden or occasionally inside. Get on the wire.
So Pat, what, after these 8 shows, what's next? Like, what does the future hold? Like, what's the next thing you're working on? Are you gonna work on?
You mean
a
number
book?
9?
Sleep.
Yeah.
No, number 9 is a party at my house.
Put everything away.
Spring. Spring, May? Okay.
How did you come to know REM?
What's that?
How did you come, if you have time for one last question, how did you come to know REM?
Well, I heard them on the radio, on college radio, Radio Free Europe, and I never heard anything like that up to that point. I was a Porky guy and then a 60s guy, and
Yeah.
I thought they really had something special.
So you reached out to them and
Well,
asked
then
them to
I-
come to Pittsburgh, or?
Pardon me?
Did you reach out to them and then book them for Pittsburgh?
Yeah, but in that concert business, when you're when you're an independent small booking agent or promoter, and there's agencies, many of them in Los Angeles, in New York, they play with you. They dangle the carrot. They know what you want, and but they're working other bands on their way up. So you get to do all the bands on their way up. And so I worked my way up to REM, which was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Did you talk to Harry Belafonte?
No, but I saw him there.
Did you have his sign?
Upstairs there's a signed Harry Belafonte album. And somewhere along the line, it came to me, I waited by many a stage door for many a half hour, 45 minutes for people to come out. And generally they were always, as much as you hoped they would be, that they really were. Very, but I learned, or I told myself, when I'm getting an autograph, or when you hand somebody to get an autograph, and I've seen them thousands of times, somebody is going to autograph, somebody of note's going to autograph something, and they look down the sign, and then the person who wants it, they're looking down too, just watching the signature. I said to myself, get something from the person when they're doing it. So I would like to have contact as they're doing it. But Harry Belafonte came out of, I think it was Heinz Hall, maybe the Benedum, and there were really a few of us. So I had that beautiful album up there, an early one with that headshot. So I gave it to him, and he took it from me, but he looked at me like that. With the Harry Belafonte eyes and that whole persona. I'll tell you, that was a moment.
What was that? We didn't quite hear it over here.
Pardon me?
What happened with Harry Belafonte? What did he say to you?
Oh, I don't know that he said too much, but oftentimes,
We didn't hear.
I like to.
We couldn't hear back there. Yes.
Oh, what did he? It was just he gave me eye contact, and it was it was electric.
Yes, thank you.
Can I ask about I'm just sitting here looking at the figure on that mantelpiece. Who made it, and how did you get it, and how did it
The one
draw
with the
you in?
turban?
Yes.
Okay, that is by Mr. Imagination, who I saw in books. He was early on in the canon, the first go around of self-taught, maybe the second, but
From what part of the country?
Mr. Imagination is from Chicago.
Okay.
His name is Gregory Warmack. He's my age, or he was my age. He's sadly gone. It's hard to believe that he's gone. He was in Chicago. He was always into fashion, I guess, but he was a sign painter, for shops or whatever. And one day he was out, and he was held up. He only had pocket change because he was, that's all he had. But he was shot several times, and he was in a coma for 13 weeks. And in his coma, he had visions, and the visions were Egyptian and a lot of eyes, and so when he came out of this coma, he was Mr. Imagination, and there was no going back.
That's cool.
And so I saw him in books. He was sitting on a throne in this one particular book, and looking straight ahead, and it's a throne that he had made with bottle caps, and it's made probably a staff. And I thought, man, I gotta meet this guy. And then I was at a folk fest in Georgia, and there was Mr. Imagination with Norman Giardeau from Lehigh University.
So he didn't do artwork until after he got shot?
I don't think so. No,
Wow.
I don't think so.
Glad you asked.
So we quickly became friends.
I love that
And,
thing.
and he lived, at that time, then he had moved to Bethlehem. And Norman Giardot was a professor at Lehigh University who wrote on comparative religions. And he had taught courses on Elvis Presley, and he was way into Howard Finster. And so we became fast friends. Music, he loved to dance. He had a prominent stutter that after a while I didn't even hear, but he would call me, he would say something like, Pat, he said, wait till you see what I have this time. And he always had something fabulous. His house was, his creations were so phenomenal, and I don't know that he was a shaman or anything like that, but he had something special, a special vision. And to be with Mr. Imagination up in New York City, he and I went to the Outsider Art Fair, and Brooke Anderson, who was the director of the American Folk Art Museum, was there. And so we came, and he had grown a little goatee, and he braided it. So she was over, and she's over touching it, and they're like this, and I'm here. And that photo ended up in the New York Times page, whatever that page. And
Fashion page.
well, I don't think it was the
New York Post.
on the same page was Bob Dylan, and he had a little turban, a little toboggan hat on or something. He looks like somebody's aunt, and I was on top of Bob Dylan there on the New York Times through no fault of my own. But to walk with Mr. Imagination was walking with magic. People, he was a magnet, and he had a big cowboy hat with bottle caps all on, and it was a very heavy one. Well, he was in Pittsburgh, and the Doors were playing. That album I have up there, signed by two of the Doors, out at Star Lake. So Marty Warhol, Mr. Imagination, Doug Shields, and myself went to see the Doors. And afterwards, because of my buddy, we were able to be back, backstage. So they four of them were sitting there, and it was Ian Astorberry from the Call was singing the Jim Morrison, and he was on it. I mean, he was something, and it was a terrific show. And so we're going down there, and Ian Astorberry sees Mr. Imagination and goes. So Mr. Wright takes his hat off, and Robbie Krieger, just a little guy, and he put that hat on Robbie Krieger, and it sunk him. It was and it weighed so much. And then Ray Manzarek's wearing a hat, but that was the magic with Mr. Wright, and oh man. So that's the story of that, and that's that would be Mr. Imagination.
What year was that piece?
I'd say
Roughly?
90 something.
Okay. Thank you.
And he's in all the museums and all the books. Okay, I wanna say gracias in the biggest with the most explanation. Meg, how many hundreds of pieces of art have you brought in and out of this place? All right. Paul, he put wires on, I put a third of my collection. A third came in without wires. And Pablo here, I got a call, I was riding in my car, I was going to shoe pool with the old guys over at Vintage. I get a call, and he says, hi, my name is Pablo Paltier. He said, and I was down in Florida, and he was a docent down there during, what's that called?
Art Basel.
Art Basel in Miami, and he was doing it for some collectors who have bigger art than him. Not better, but just bigger. And he met Richard Goldman, who was Esther Phillips' nephew, and he's also a Pitt guy, and he just finished up at Pitt with, museum something or other, finances, and,
We'll get it eventually.
So this Richard Goldman said, "Oh, you're from Pittsburgh. You have to call Pat. You have to call Pat when you get back there." So he gets back in town, and he called me, cold called me. And so I said, "Man," I said, "I don't know if there was a full moon that night, that day," but I said, "Oh, your museum studies and curation?" I said, "Well, this could be our lucky day. I'm putting on 8 upcoming exhibitions, 1 a week." And so I said, "You want in?" He said, "Yeah, he wants in." So I went and picked him up. We went to G. David Thompson's grave that day in the cemetery. We went to Meg's, the house she's renovating. We had a Pablo and Pat day, and it's been fabulous. And the future for him is anything he wants it to be. That guy.
I gotta
Look,
tell
he
you.
even brought his crew. Look. Oh. And his mom came. DC. Bonnie. And hey, I can hang it on walls, but if you guys don't come, who's going to see it? So thank you.